Hello, and thank you for volunteering to be a University of Melbourne mentor. This video is a recording of a face-to-face preparation workshop facilitated by the University of Melbourne's Alumni Relations Office and the Melbourne Careers Centre, held on the 17th of February 2016. The video runs for approximately 25 minutes, and you have the option at any time to skip ahead to a new section. Around 40 mentors from the University of Melbourne alumni community participated in the workshop. Volunteer mentors are from a broad range of backgrounds and professions. Our volunteers participate in programs from across the university, including the Faculty of Arts, the Science Industry Mentoring Program, Law, Business and Access Connections Mentoring.
So just to introduce myself, my name's Louise Kellerman. I coordinate the Access Connections Mentor Program. And why mentoring? So the students that are coming into this program, they're really at this stage where their world is changing and shifting, and they're trying to make decisions about who they are, what they want to do, what do careers look like. And so they have maybe this warped vision of themselves. And the mentoring, you're really being that mirror and holding it up to them and saying, well, this is how it is in the real world. These are my experiences, and this is what perhaps you can learn from them. So it's giving them that opportunity to bounce ideas off you. So mentoring really fills that gap in their knowledge and in their understanding of themselves and of the actual working world. And maybe just to give you an example of a student that I know that found it difficult because of the background that he had come from. So he was first in family. He was studying to do a PhD in science. And so his parents said, "You're crazy. Why are you doing this? Why are you studying for this amount of years? You should be out, you should get a job." And they didn't understand necessarily the benefit of education and the benefit of that study. So for him, it was really difficult to continually have people not supporting him in his decisions. So having a mentor for him, means that he has someone there that maybe understands that experience and that can help him and support him. So that's really the idea of the program, and it is career-based. It's really focused on helping students to make career development decisions that are going to help them maybe to go on and do graduate study, or perhaps they want to pursue a different career when they finish their courses. So what is mentoring? So as a mentor, really what you're doing is you're challenging a student, you're challenging their perceptions, perhaps of how they see themselves and how they see a particular career. You're motivating them to achieve their goals, inspiring them with your stories and your experiences, and even maybe things that you failed in that you've learnt from, and encouraging them, because I think a lot of the students, we're finding they lose confidence, and it can be really hard to maintain confidence, especially if you're going to go on and study for a number of years. So having someone to say, keep going, it's okay, it takes time, that's really beneficial for the students. So mentoring is a relationship. It's not necessarily about one person gaining one thing and one person not. It's very much a mutual relationship of mutual benefit. So we see that it should be a positive experience for you as well as for the students. It's about empowering the students to make decisions themselves, and it's also a safe place where they can discuss, perhaps assumptions that they have, and you can help them to work through that. So you're really a sounding board for students. So what isn't mentoring? So it's not tutoring, it's not academic support. We're not expecting students to bring their assignments to you when you meet and get you to check over them. If they do that, that's not what it's about. So it's not counselling. I think there are a few people that actually are psychologists, so that might be difficult for them. They might fall into that role quite easily. But I think that you need to, it's very much, there is a barrier, and it's about the discussions that you have are around career development and are around challenging their ideas and their perceptions, but it's not about delving deep into their psychological issues and talking them through that. That's really something that they need to do in a different setting. So we don't have that expectation from you, and we have services for students if you feel they need them, and they're free. So it's not job recruitment. There's no expectation that you're going to help students to get internships or introduce them to your whole network. It's about the relationship you have with each other. Sometimes when you're meeting with a mentee, and I had this with a mentee that I had in my previous role, and he was fantastic and I really wanted to be his champion, and he applied for jobs and he wasn't succeeding. And so he said to me, if you don't help me, I don't have a chance. And that's a dependent relationship. And to get in that point, you have to realise that's not what you are for the mentees. You don't have to save them. They're responsible for their journey and they're responsible for their decisions. So it's not about dependency. You obviously want them to do well, but it's not your responsibility. It's very much about empowering them to make positive decisions. And it's also, it's not critiquing the decisions a student makes. Maybe they might make some decisions or choices you don't agree with. So it's a little bit about, withholding judgment so that it's a safe place for mentees to talk through their problems. Some people talk about mentoring as having certain qualities that are inherent qualities, but I think that that's maybe not completely right. I think that they are skills. They're skills that you can learn, and I think that you develop them through practice. And the three sort of skills areas that we're going to talk about is active listening, insight, which is what you were just participating in, and openness, and empathy, which is really vital. So active listening seems really straightforward, just pay attention and listen. But it's actually much harder than that. Recently, at Christmas lunch, I had a scenario where I was talking to my uncle, who I've talked to many, many times about travel. And usually I just switch off because he thinks that you only travel in Australia, you don't go overseas. And I love travelling. I've just come back from doing the Trans-Siberian Railway. So I wanted to talk about that, but he shut down initially, and he didn't want to hear about it. So I thought, well, why does he react this way, and why am I getting this response, and how can I maybe use some of these skills to see what his background is and why he has this experience and response. So instead of sort of saying to him, why don't you travel overseas, or haven't you travelled? Why wouldn't you do that? I just said, what is it about travelling overseas that you don't like? What experiences have you had when you travelled overseas that make you feel this way? And instead of him getting his back up and arguing with me, he talked about his experiences, and he told me that he's been overseas twice. One was to bury his father, and the other time was to go to war. So he doesn't really like going overseas. And he has a very different experience to me, where I'm going on a holiday. And perhaps we wouldn't have got to that point if I hadn't have maybe paid attention and withheld judgment about something that he's chosen to do that I wouldn't choose to do. And I think that is what active listening is. It's difficult. It's more difficult with people you know really well. It's probably a little bit easier with mentees because you don't have that history and that experience, and you can sort of switch it on and say, okay, I'm going to really be in the moment, I'm going to pay attention, I'm going to try and reflect back, and I'm going to withhold judgment. And that's sort of how active listening works. And open-ended questions are really important. What, how, and why. So if you're stuck on how to start a conversation, starting it with a question that is how, what, or why is a great way to get mentees to open up and start talking. Closed questions, obviously, they're answered with a yes or no. Have you travelled overseas? No. The conversation ends. So using open-ended questions is really vital as mentors. And then insight, which we've already talked about a little bit. I think with insight, it is having that understanding about yourself and how you've made decisions. And it actually goes both ways. It's not just insight about yourself, but it's having the ability to speak to a mentee, listen to what they have to say, and then perhaps reflect that back or see where their decision-making thought processes perhaps aren't quite right. And I think insight and openness really go together. They're very similar in a way. So being able to identify those areas where a mentee maybe is lacking in information, and then sharing and being open about your experiences. A mentee that I spoke to last semester was talking about, she's doing a Bachelor of Arts, and she wanted to get into the not-for-profit sector. So she had a mentor that had worked in that area. And she was thinking, I might go on, do development work, get some experience. But when she was talking to her mentor decided to sort of share her actual experiences working in a not-for-profit. And the particular one she worked at was, not run that well. It was not as professional as some other organisations. And she said, well, what the organisation really needed is not another student studying international development. They needed someone who's done an MBA. They needed business skills, and that would have been really valuable. And so she sort of shared her experiences with her work, and that student actually has chosen to go on and do an MBA. And I think that's really interesting. She wouldn't have thought that if her mentor hadn't have shared that experience with her. And she must have also seen something in what she was talking about that she thought she has that aptitude and interest in that area, and it's just maybe perhaps giving her a little bit of a push. I've got a short video about empathy. So empathy is the last skill that I think everyone knows, or we all think we know what empathy is, but I've had so many arguments about what's empathy and what's sympathy. So I thought rather than me saying what I think it is, I really like this video that's been put together. This is what my colleague Emily, who you may have had emails from, she actually volunteers at Wire, and this is what they use to train people for phone operators so that they have an understanding of what empathy is. And I think it's quite succinct.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
What we're doing is we're providing students with the exact same page of the SMART goals and the checklist. So they'll come to the meeting hopefully with that as well, and you're both on the same page. So SMART goals. So I think it's easier, rather than go through and tell you what you can see on the screen, can give you an example of a goal and how it might fit with this. So for me personally, going to Russia, I would love to be able to speak Russian better. I speak okay, but not very good Russian. So that's a goal that I have. So if I was to put that goal through the SMART filter, I'd say that's probably not specific enough. It's a bit vague better. So maybe I might say, I want to be able to hold a conversation with my sister-in-law who's Russian when she comes to visit in November. So that's really specific. I want to be able to have a conversation with her. Is it measurable? Well, yes, because I'll know whether she understands me when we have a conversation. Is it achievable? Do I have any understanding of Russian? Can I actually do this? Do I need to go and do a course? Do I actually have the money to do that? Can I actually do it with all of my other commitments? And then I'll make that assessment, obviously, and decide, yes, I can do that. Is it relevant? Why am I doing this? So this would be for a personal benefit, maybe rather than a professional one. But it is relevant because it will help me to have stronger relationship with my sister-in-law. So I think that it's something that I want to do, is something that's a personal objective. And is it time bound? Well, it is, because I have a deadline. You don't have to be laboriously going through this. You can quite easily have a goal and use it. So before you meet your mentee, I guess just have a think about how many meetings do you want to commit to? How would you like to manage the communication between the meetings? I have had mentees in the past that will email me every single week, a couple times a week, and it's quite overwhelming. So I think in those circumstances, it's just being upfront initially about what you can commit to, and thinking about, are you going to be travelling? Are you going to be overseas at all? Just making sure that you let your mentee know. And where and when do you want to meet? Do you want to take them to your workplace at all? Would you like to just meet in a cafe? And here we've got an example of 3 meetings. If you just choose to do the basic 3 meetings, and how you could potentially map them out, it's completely up to you what you want to do. Be as creative as you like and work with your mentees in whatever you would like to work with them to achieve. Some ideas are perhaps in the first meeting to set some mentoring goals. Maybe in the second meeting you could do a CV check, talk about their more career goal setting, and then if you're having 3 meetings, maybe then you would take them around to the workplace, or wrap it up, have a chat about how they're going with their goals. I think 3 meetings is good. More meetings is better. You're building a relationship, so if you can have more meetings than 3, I'd definitely recommend it if you have the time, because it may take some shy mentees a little while to open up. So if you can meet more than 3 times, that would be great. I think for the first meeting, just consider meeting in a cafe or somewhere neutral, a library, something like that, so that there isn't maybe that imbalance as much about that you're a professional and that they're a student, and they don't feel that as strongly. I think sometimes if you're in a neutral space, that helps for them to feel a little bit more secure and able to open up. The mentee is responsible for the relationship. So they contact you, they need to organise the meetings. And if you are going to end the relationship, we suggest maybe having a wrap-up meeting where you're really clear. You say, this is our final meeting. We're going to just go through what we've discussed. We're going to talk about what you're going to do ongoing. Because then you've got there's a finality about it. I think they want to learn about your careers. I think that a lot of students come through and they say, well, I want to do this. I want to study dentistry. I want to be a dentist. I want to speak to someone who's done this. And so their initial... Well, yeah, then you have to leave. No, and I think that is sometimes when they're applying, that's their mindset. And what we try to say to them is like, that's great that you want to do that, and you might speak to someone that's done that and learn something, but there are lots of different avenues. And so we try to say to them, look, be open to experiences and be open to a person's unique experiences and what you might learn from that. It doesn't matter if you're not in the same field. So we really do say that to them, and I think a lot of students that I've spoken to recently, they're aware of that. They want to speak to someone who's got a different perspective maybe than their lecturers and their friends and their family. So you're giving them some feedback, but they're not really taking any of it on board.
Yeah.
I think that's really hard because you can't control their decisions. And all you can do is probe their process in how they're making those decisions and give them a different perspective. If you're having a relationship where you think, this person is really frustrating and they're not listening to anything that I'm saying, and I think that it's actually inappropriate, then I'd recommend definitely you probably don't want to continue. But if you think they're just not getting it, they're just not understanding what I'm saying, if you want to just commit to the 3 meetings, maybe if you persist, you might get through to them. It takes a long time for people to change their thoughts and ideas. And if you just want to do the 3 meetings, you can see at the end, well, maybe I won't continue because I've tried and it's not really worked. Maybe I'll have another mentee next semester. Because it's not, 3 meetings isn't a long time, So I think maybe in that instance, you just have less meetings. I think it depends on your relationship with them, but I'd be careful about pushing them too much, because if you feel like it's a confidence issue, that might not be the best way to tackle it. It might be thinking about, well, what is it about their lack of confidence? Where is that coming from? If it's really severe and they can't do anything and they're crippled and paralysed, then they might need some extra help outside of the mentor and mentee relationship. Yeah, I don't know if I can help them, but I can definitely refer them. It's unlikely we'll match them up again, and the only reason is, so this semester I had over 200 students apply. We've got about 120 pairs, and there's some great students in there that we weren't able to match up, and I've encouraged them to apply again next semester. So I'll give the students who haven't had that experience first preference, and usually there's quite large numbers, so it's unlikely they'll get another mentor. But they might have the confidence to approach someone themselves. Yeah. I think it's the quality, definitely. It's the quality of the relationship. I do know, I have run other programs where it's a little bit longer, and I think if it is longer, you do have that opportunity to establish a relationship a bit more. Some people will choose that they want to have more students that they work with, so what you could do is you can have 2 students for a longer period of time. If you had the time. So that's one option, which would be great from our point of view. But you might not want to commit to that. I think it depends where you think the mentee's up to. If you feel like there's more work there that you can really contribute to, I'd definitely encourage you just to stay with them and continue, because you've already kind of done that work, and if you feel like you can really help them, that makes sense to me, rather than finishing and getting another student.